And then to combat that, these other archaeologists, it's this neutral tone that's not meant to be intentionally combative to the mainstream or whatever. They just kind of they reference the mainstream and say, "I disagree with the mainstream," whatever. But then the mainstream attacks them. An archaeologist is
Because you're yeah.
Yeah, an archaeologist is an expert in many, many things, but archaeology is also a very, very broad field that requires the expertise and the input from various other fields to give us a better perspective of the ancient world, right?
Yes.
Because if I saw a giant stone temple, and as an archaeologist, maybe my first impression, maybe I'm more worried about trying to find a tomb. Maybe I'm more worried about canopic jars, which are these, alabaster, very beautiful jars that Egyptians stored their remains in, like inside their tombs. Maybe that's more my thing. Maybe I'm more worried about mummification. So when I walk into a temple that has these mind-bogglingly gigantic stones, it just doesn't register in my brain because it's not something that registers with me. And I don't see the importance in it, right? And so I kind of shrug off, like, when somebody who's not an archaeologist that I don't respect in this area, when they say something about like, "Are you seeing this huge stone temple? How did they do this?" And I go, "You're not really an expert. You don't really know what you're talking about."
That's the problem.
That's what's happening in academia. Not just archaeology. It's any academia that's run by humans. The same thing is happening.
But the answer is not to become what you hate.
It's not. It's not.
I say this in almost every podcast because it comes up in the context of almost everything we ever think about. But the universal law of physics: for every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. The offset is supposed to be equilibrium, but it can be painful depending on how big those actions are in either direction. So when you have this ivory tower, close-end academic world that has taken this attitude for so long and had, no, we'll take care of this, you people run along. In an age now, like I said 20 minutes ago, where the internet exists and people have this research that they're fascinated in at their fingertips, when those people raise points, not even points of like, hey, this is definitely what it is, but it starts as like questions, like, hey, have you thought about this? And they're told, no, fuck off, run along. You develop people into being anti-you and wanting then, like, even if they don't realize it, wanting to have the confirmation bias of finding whatever the opposite of what you think is.
Yeah.
And to me, a tough example of how far we've come that was tough to watch because of who it was that sit down that Joe had with Hancock and Dibble. Mm-hmm. Because Flint Dibble is a very mainstream archaeologist. He does bring a lot of evidence to things. I think some of his attitude is a little bit like cringe, and it's like, oh, no, this is what we archaeologists think. Now, Danny had him on, really liked him, said he was a good guy, so, maybe he is a really good guy. I just think some of his attitude towards that makes you want to not root for him off the bat. Sure. That said, he body bagged Graham Hancock, and I could even correct that comment and say Graham Hancock really body bagged himself. Because in that sit-down, not that Flint Dibble was right about every goddamn thing, and not that he didn't write off some things, and it was like 4 hours long or something, that, maybe he probably shouldn't have written off based on whatever evidence he thought he had. But, like, Hancock was coming with anecdotal evidence at best on many things, and also, devolving it into, look what you called me, and look what you did to me, which is playing the exact game those guys want him to play, because here you have one of the godfathers of the non-academic movement on this thing, who, whether he wants to be or not, is a representative of so many different people who are seeking, to find some truth or ask the right questions and be heard. And that's not a good look when you go on there. And then, him creating all those Twitter wars afterwards. It's, I don't know Graham. I've been a fan of listening to him over the years. It doesn't just all change overnight because of that, but that was very disappointing.
Yeah, well, I so two things to preface what I'm going to say is I have respect for both of those guys. Obviously, I grew up under the influence of Graham Hancock heavily. I might not be doing what I'm doing if Graham Hancock wasn't born.
I agree with you.
Secondly, Flint Dibble, I don't know him personally. It's been a while since we've spoken. But I think before he even went, a few months before he even went on Joe Rogan's podcast to debate Graham, he and I spoke to each other, and he gave me personally a lot of resources that I used in studying ancient Greece,
Really?
and some of those resources specifically, because he's an expert in, well, I say an expert, but he knows a lot about Minoan Crete. I don't think that that's like his specific thing of
Yeah.
expertise, but Minoan Crete, Bronze Age Greek culture, very interesting. Might be the basis or an inspiration for Plato's Atlantis as well. I think Plato's Atlantis is probably a culmination of many civilizations, great civilizations that were destroyed under cataclysms. This happened to the Minoans. He's probably being inspired by other things as well. We can get into that. But I wanted to learn more about the Minoans, and that actually, his recommendation for some of these textbooks and academic resources actually led me to writing my paper called "The Flower That Seduced Egypt." So, I appreciated him he took a significant amount of time to give me a very, very long response to some things. And, but I agree with you that as an academic who's going to be around in this field for a long time, I think that my attitude and my approach will be a lot different. Because
Yes.
because I think that whether it's warranted or not, I think being aggressive with people turns off their brains.
I agree
They
100%.
don't care what you're saying.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of times academics, especially archaeologists that are in this, combating misinformation movement, like combating Graham Hancock, they present all of their information in a condescending manner, as if they don't actually love what they're talking about. Like, you don't see the love for what they're talking about come through. And that, I was very inspired. The wonder and the romance of ancient history and archaeology, I was very inspired to pull that, to manifest that to the front of my personality by my mentor, Ed Barnhart, and by, who I think is maybe the greatest lecturer of all time, Dr. Bob Breyer. He's an Egyptologist.
Yep.
I think that Gregory Aldrete does a great job too. And then I think,
We're trying to get him on the show. Come
think,
on, Greg.
Yeah, and then I think, right there, coming up behind those guys, who's gonna be like a great voice for Roman history told in stone.
I agree, dude.
You can tell
he's amazing.
You can tell how much he loves what he's talking about.
He's amazing. Yeah.
And so when I speak to people, even though I have a healthy amount of skepticism about things, and I have a healthy amount of respect and understanding of the mainstream or traditional understanding of ancient history. I don't ever talk down to people. What remains of the surface for me is I hope that people can tell how much I deeply love what I'm talking about. And sometimes I think that people, they don't want to hear about why tombs exist in Egypt, and they don't want to hear about the psychology of how Egyptians came to be who they were, and how if you understand that, you might have a better understanding of the pyramids. You might have a better understanding of why they exist and where they exist, and why all these things came to be. All that's important, but it's not. It's presented as though, the only reason that you don't understand anything about the pyramids is because you don't understand this, and this is what this really is. And all the information is it's always presented in this negative connotation. It's condescending, or some people, there's been this huge movement in the last a little bit less than a decade of ancient history YouTubers that, let's say like Uncharted X, Ben from Uncharted X, or, whoever else. They are presenting interesting research that you can or can disagree with, or you can agree or disagree with, it doesn't matter. But they're presenting it in kind of a neutral tone, right? And then to combat that, these other archaeologists, it's this neutral tone that's not meant to be intentionally combative to the mainstream or whatever. They just they reference the mainstream and say, I disagree with the mainstream, whatever. But then the mainstream attacks them in return, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like low blows them,
Yes.
rather than giving it a respectful response most of the time. And so what that does is it immediately creates bad blood, and these people and all the people who are fans of them immediately turn you off. Negative response, turned off.
Yes.
And so it's created this battle now. And now you have entire archaeologists who have made YouTube channels, and the YouTube channel is specifically meant for debunking. You are not breeding a positive community. You're not breeding a positive place. And a lot of these YouTubers, their only big hit videos are debunking Graham Hancock. So you have made yourself a villain. You know, that doesn't.
It's a lot of money in that.
Sure. And you've made yourself a villain. You're going to get the views, but you're not breeding a positive place, and you're not breeding like an evergreen garden that's going to last forever. This is going to die off as fast as the thing you're attacking dies off. It's just not good. And so I think that, I kind of think that's where I stand with this whole culture war.
Well, yeah. Well, this is where you come in, Luke Caverns. This is your opportunity. This is why I liked you off the bat, because your passion and genuine love for what you do comes off like crazy. I mean, you love this stuff inside and out. You are tickled that you get to do this for a living. And there are, to your point, there's some people where it almost feels like, they've devoted their life to it, but they talk about it in such a way that, you said that beautifully, like that almost feels like it's just a matter of business rather than an actual exploration.
It's like they're bitter that they have to talk about it.
Yes. And for you, as we've outlined today, are able to straddle those two worlds, the pure academic world and the independent researcher world, because you have pieces of both of those in your background, and you are very open-minded. You're not only open-minded about being wrong about things and changing your opinion, as you've already demonstrated with some things today as opposed to our last podcast, but you are also someone who is willing, without being prompted to do so, to say, I don't fucking know. Yeah. Or this is not my area right here. And there are so many goddamn charlatans in academia and outside it, in both of these realms, who they got to have a fucking answer for everything. And they got to explain, well, it could be this or it could be that. And you are humble in who you are. You're also like, so much. I mean, this has been mesmerizing today so far, listening to all this and you just creating these timelines and going down these perfect rabbit holes and explaining how it all ties together. And like, you're not even 30 years old. So the whole world is your fucking oyster here. But I want people like you to win. That's why I bring you on here. That's why I'll continue to bring you on here. I try to look for people who are going to be close to how you think about things. But I have not, it's not like I've casted the widest net yet. I'm still early. I'm 5 years into this, whatever it is. Like, I'm still early on here. Yeah. But, I haven't found people who are as sober about things as you are. That's how I've described you to other people. Like, when I was talking to Jesse Michaels about you yesterday, like, I'm like, this guy is sober in how he looks at things. He's not going to go fucking, on a bender and tell you, I'm going to tell you the whole meaning of the world when he's got nothing behind it. He's just going to tell you the facts as he knows them and the things that we still have to figure out. Yeah. And that, to me, like, the fact that there are people at home who cannot handle that, or their brains that are probably perfectly big and they probably have intelligence. It's not because they're stupid, but they have got themselves to a point where they cannot hold two thoughts at one time. And the idea that one thing that could go against their worldview of YouTube videos that they fucking watched, or papers maybe that they've read, will offend them to such a degree that they'll shut it down is crazy. I mean, Danny had a guy like helping run his Discord for I don't know how long, and it was like not the biggest Discord, so he wasn't like paying that close attention. But without even saying anything, when Danny brought on Flint Dibble, the guy deleted the Discord. Didn't even say anything to him. Yeah. And I'm like, well, that guy's a fucking moron. Yeah. Like those are not the people you want to breed. Yeah. To be in an audience. I don't want people to feel like they got to be a zealot on something. You can have hard opinions in the audience. I know I have plenty of people in my audience who do, across all different types of spectrums. But the idea that, like, you are so against, someone saying something different than you think, that you delete the dude's Discord that who brings them up. Like, come on, bro. Yeah. When I see stuff like that, I get really disappointed. And to be clear, that's a minority of people. You just happen to have one bad apple there doing that. But, we got to get to a point where we can talk about this in the diplomatic way with which you talk about it and research it. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. I feel like I'm kind of standing on a little bit of an island right now where, and maybe that's a good place to be. But I feel like I'm standing on a little bit of an island where I am trying to tell everybody who is moving in this one direction. Because, speaking in general terms without calling people out, sometimes I see people make really interesting videos 5 years ago. And in the comments of those videos, there are people who are saying, there'll be a vast group of people saying, hey, I wonder if this leads to this thing. I wonder if this leads to this thing. Oh, yeah, that sounds really interesting. And then all of a sudden, a couple years later, I see that creator is creating videos only highlighting the evidence that they know is really going to excite their audience without highlighting the evidence that's counter to it, right?
Yes.
And you're creating an echo chamber by doing that. And you're actually manipulating your own audience, and you're breeding an audience that is less informed than you are. And it's just not a recipe for a good state of mind. It's not a recipe for a healthy life. And it's not a recipe for success either, because that is very limited, and it's just immoral to do that. And so in all of my videos, and I've just not even scratched the surface of the things I'm planning to cover. Like, I've wanted to talk about Egypt on my channel for so long, and I have done it intermittently, but studied it for a while, and now I've been there. I feel like I have a good solid foundation to be making videos about it now. But in my videos, I am presenting to you what is known and just telling people what my ideas are. And I'm also presenting the counter evidence for my ideas. And we're going to get to that when we get to the pyramids, when we get to the Great Pyramid here in a minute. 'Cause, that is the center point of all of this.
Yeah, let's do that. This is perfect because we just had a nice tangent on that, but I want to keep you on your timeline because it's been incredible.
Sure. So now we have gone from so let's just wrap up Senefru real quick and his three pyramids. So it's a very contentious idea to think that this idea that he constructed the pyramid of Maidum, which the outer layers somehow collapsed.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.